Wow, talk about a plot twist. Just when our protagonist laid out ambitious plans for expansion, rights, laws, and even schools, bam! Nature throws a massive curveball with that terrifying flood warning. The deduction about the downstream blockage was brilliant, but seeing those plans sidelined for an emergency expedition? Intense. The journey downstream felt so real. The eerie fog, the unsettling sight of drowned animals. You could almost feel the chill. And then rescuing that poor woman, only to stumble upon that horrifying child sacrifice ritual. My blood ran cold. That ending. Forget the blockage for a second. Are they going to save those kids? What kind of confrontation is about to explode on that shore? This chapter went from strategic planning to desperate survival and raw fury in a heartbeat. I absolutely have to know what happens next. Hearing the leaders shout, "If we can't save them, nobody eats." The starving crowd got an instant shot of adrenaline and paddled desperately towards the spot where the children had fallen in. Compassion? What was that? Could you eat it? Their next meal was what mattered. The flagship you personally commanded surged far ahead, cutting through the waves. The little girl clutching your trouser leg watched wide-eyed as two children from her tribe were thrown into the cold water just like she had been. She was frantic, almost crying, shaking your pants while pointing at the small heads bobbing in the water, wailing loudly. She knew you couldn't understand her, but seeing you, directing everyone to rush over and save them, she quieted down slightly. Still, her small hand gripped you tightly, her lip bitten in fear that they might be too late. Just as your water rescue team sped forward, the group of culprits on the high cliff were collectively stunned. They stared wide-eyed at the vast fleet of boats on the water, looking as though they'd seen a ghost in broad daylight. What in the world is that? Looks like people. But how can people float on water? Shaman, the fellow who had just thrown the children in, asked the old man presiding over the ritual, his voice trembling. What is that? Has the river god come to collect the offerings? In his mind, the shaman knew the heavens above and the earth below, and could even chat with the gods. If there was something he didn't understand, asking the shaman was always right. Unfortunately, this time the shaman was stumped too. The old man stared at the water's surface, equally shocked. Those people were riding miraculous contraptions that could travel on water, with things paddling on both sides as numerous and unsettling as centipede legs. Those who could command such things were surely no ordinary mortals. But what did they want? While the old shaman was still pondering, your boat had already rushed up to them. You leaned directly over the bow, half your body extended, and snatched up a little boy. The child had struggled until he had no strength left, his little belly round and swollen. Clearly, he'd swallowed a lot of water. You quickly checked for breath. Thankfully, it was faint, but still there. It was a matter of life and death. No time for second thoughts. You grabbed an iron pot from the boat, clanged it upside down onto the deck, placed the boy face down over the pot's base, and pressed hard on his back to induce vomiting. Luckily, he was still breathing. No need for the complexities of CPR. Expelling the water and keeping him warm would suffice. While you were busy, another boat swiftly scooped up the little girl and quickly brought her to your vessel for emergency aid. The people on the other boats, having nothing better to do, glared angrily at the troublemakers on the shore. Damn them. Because of their reckless actions, we almost missed our meal. Many had already quietly raised their crossbows and bows, aiming menacingly at the shore. If those people dared to make a move, they might just have to stage a beach landing and employ some physical persuasion. On your boat, after some effort, both little ones finally came around. Fortunately, they hadn't been in the water long, unlike the little girl beside you, who had drifted for so long back then that even if she hadn't drowned, she would have frozen to death. The children, having cheated death, didn't cry or fuss. Their eyes were empty, dazed and listless. The terror had been too great a shock to their young minds. One could only hope there would be no lasting trauma. You handed the two children over to the girl to look after, then raised your head, glaring unfriendly at the group on the cliff. You quickly scanned the surroundings. A vast expanse of water, distant mountains with only this island before you offering a decent landing spot. It even had trees, enough to gather some firewood for warmth. All boats turn right, circle the island. Find a gentle slope to land, you ordered decisively. The rescue spot was very close to the altar. Your shouts and the fleet's responses were clearly heard by those on shore. They're people. They can talk. They took the offerings. Look quickly. Next to the one who took the offerings, isn't that the holy maiden we offered to the river god yesterday? Heavens, it really is the holy maiden. They must have stolen her, that's why the river god hasn't shown his power. Spring is almost here, but the water is still rising. If it keeps rising, even this mountaintop will be submerged. How are we supposed to live? Boo-hoo-hoo. Chaos erupted around the altar, filled with wailing, crying, and cursing. Some cursed you for meddling, while others howled in despair. In truth, these pitiful people resorted to human sacrifice out of desperation. The whole affair traced back to last summer. This so-called island was actually a mountain. Last summer, devastating floods caused the river to swell maniacally, submerging half the mountain and leaving only the upper slopes above water, making it look like an island. Trapped on the mountain was a nomadic farming tribe called the Zhan. They had cultivated sticky rice for generations, which was sticky to the teeth when eaten, hence the name Zhan tribe. Nomadic farming, or shifting cultivation, was essentially a hit-and-run style of agriculture. Early farming techniques were poor. They practiced slash and burn, clearing a patch of land, scratching the soil haphazardly with stone tools or wooden sticks, scattering seeds, and then leaving it be. Fertility? What was that? When the soil was depleted and harvests plummeted, what could they do? Move, find another piece of land to exploit. The Zhan tribe had to migrate every 2 to 5 years, seeking new land near water sources to plant their rice. 2 years ago, they migrated here. They had just enjoyed one good year when the Great Flood hit, that summer. The riverside fields were the first to go. Then the water level surged, forcing the entire tribe to retreat higher up the mountain. Fortunately, the floodwaters also drove many birds and beasts uphill, temporarily solving their food problem. They initially thought the floodwaters would recede quickly, but then a landslide occurred, forming a barrier lake, causing the water level to rise instead of fall. The area they could inhabit shrank continuously, and the game on the mountain became scarcer. With spring approaching, the melting ice and snow would cause the water to rise further. Weren't they doomed to be trapped and perish on the mountaintop? Out of desperation, the Zhan tribe organized this ritual sacrifice. They selected the most beautiful, newly adult maiden in the tribe as an offering, hoping to give her to the river god as a wife, pleading for him to quell his anger and make the waters recede. As fate would have it, this holy maiden was rescued by you. How could the Zhan tribe know? They only saw the water level continuing to rise, assumed the river god was displeased with the insufficient offering, and so today they upped the ante, sacrificing a pair of young boys and girls. And then, you intercepted them again. This was deeply awkward. The people on shore argued noisily, finally reaching a consensus. It was you outsiders who had disrupted the ritual, stolen the offerings, and angered the river god. Now the river god was going to drown them all. You had to be eliminated. Seeing your fleet begin to circle the island, the Zhan tribe members on shore also started moving. A dense crowd of 200 to 300 adult men, brandishing crude weapons, like stone axes, stone hoes, and bone spears, scrambled along the rugged, shrub-covered mountain path in pursuit. Whoa, quite a crowd. 200 or 300 men alone meant the whole tribe numbered at least 1,000. Not a small tribe. Unfortunately for them, 2 legs couldn't outrun boats on water. By the time they arrived, panting and breathless, you had already found a gentle slope and begun landing. Land, land, move quickly. You stood in the knee-deep water shouting commands. Shield soldiers, form ranks for defense. Spearmen, provide cover. Archers, prepare. Many of the people you brought were regular soldiers from the Han tribe, though not numerous. and equipped with the new weapons accumulated over the past year, arming several hundred was feasible. Boat after boat charged onto the beach, running, half aground. Hearing the orders, the people on board, led by their respective boat captains, moved swiftly. Wooden shields were the easiest to make, and they had plenty. Shield after shield, each half the height of a man, was quickly raised, forming a three-sided square formation facing the beach, protecting the boats within. The weapons held by the shield-bearers in their other hands were a motley collection. A dozen gleaming steel knives were rare items. The rest were mostly military shovels, iron hammers, and axes, tools originally brought for work, now doubling as weapons. As soon as the shield wall was up, the spearmen immediately followed, thrusting brightly polished spear tips through the gaps in the shields, some resting directly on the shield-bearers' shoulders, glinting coldly. In the center of the formation, archers drew their bows and nocked arrows. The few old tribal chiefs acting as guides were sheltered in the very center. You hadn't expected them to fight anyway, just as your side finished forming ranks, standing. Ready? The Zhan tribesmen rushed over excitedly, intending to settle scores with you. But when they saw the scene before them, they collectively froze. What the hell? You can fight like this? They saw this group that had just landed, every single one hiding behind large wooden planks. Dense rows of long spears poked out from the gaps between the planks, their tips flashing with intimidating white or golden light. Mixed among them were many early bronze spears used for killing wolves. Inside the large circle, others held strange weapons. Their tribe's holy maiden and the two recently sacrificed children were also inside the encirclement. Dozens of large red, yellow, and black banners fluttered in the wind, all bearing the same unfamiliar symbol. The Zhan tribe leader, a middle-aged man named Zhan Mao, had also arrived. Seeing this unprecedented formation, he immediately halted. But just because he stopped didn't mean everyone did. There were always hotheads, and with the leader having given no command, they continued charging forward, yelling war cries. One muscle-bound man ran the fastest, raising a stone hoe high, howling as he charged. Just as he entered the 100-meter range, there was a twang from a trigger mechanism. The bolt from the crossbow in your hand was already loosed. Swish. Thud. Ah! The brawny man fell instantly, clutching his thigh and rolling on the ground, screaming in agony. You hadn't aimed to kill. The crossbow bolt had perfectly pierced his thigh, the shaft passing clean through, pinning it firmly. The Zhan tribesmen following behind were instantly petrified, then overcome by immense fear. Heavens! Their weapons can shoot that far. We can't go any further, any closer, and we're dead. At this distance, our throwing spears and rocks can't even reach them. What do we do? Thoughts varied among the Zhan men, but all stood frozen, afraid to move. The guy hit by the arrow up ahead was still howling like a banshee. Apparently he wasn't dead. So, a few mustered their courage, dashed forward, and hastily carried him back. The injured man was brought before the leader, Zhan Mao. Everyone stared at the small wooden stick as it appeared to them, piercing the thigh, feeling their scalps tingle. Zhan Mao, however, remained relatively calm. The enemy possessed such formidable weapons, yet had only wounded, not killed. It seemed like a warning. Perhaps there was room for negotiation. Maybe they could get the offerings back. Having made up his mind, Zhan Mao began to cautiously approach your formation, attempting to communicate. Your objective was also achieved. What was the point of all this fighting? Couldn't they just talk things out properly? Did they really have to see blood before they were satisfied? Did they just enjoy asking for trouble? Zhan Mao, looking like a startled rabbit, crept gingerly forward to where the unlucky fellow had been shot, not daring to take another step. Then he yelled towards your group, "Hey, you people over there, give us back our offerings. Those two little ones and the woman behind them, the Han tribesmen. The hell? Right, talking past each other. Except for the girl next to you who had just been intended as an offering herself. Hearing her own chieftain's death summons, she scrambled backward, terrified, her soul nearly flying out. But a glance at you beside her, fiddling with that strange contraption, the crossbow, Grunting as you reloaded it seemed to instantly give her a backbone. She quickly sidled up to you, grabbing your sleeve and shaking it vigorously. Then she pointed at Zhan Mao outside the formation, then at herself and the two kids, and finally shook her head like a rattledrum. You got it instantly. The boss over there wanted his delivery back, but the delivery was refusing. Receipt, unwilling to return under any circumstances. Okay, simple and clear. You patted her hand reassuringly, signaling, "Don't worry, Big Bro's got this." Then you stuffed the crossbow into the hands of a nearby flag bearer, pushed aside the tribesmen blocking your way, and strode out alone, full of swagger. Zhan Mao stared as you walked towards him, his eyes nearly popping out. This leader looked way too young, barely an adult by the looks of it, with a face full of still a baby innocence. But those eyes, whoa, they held the shrewdness of someone who'd lived several lifetimes. And then there was your outfit. A stylish black crossover robe, the collar trimmed with flashy golden red fox fur, thick-soled deerskin high boots that clicked with each step, a palm-wide leather belt around your waist fastened with a blindingly bright bronze buckle. Something, with a white bone handle hanging at your side, its purpose unclear but fancily decorated. Even your head sported a glittering gold crown that gathered all your hair. This Deluxe Plus ensemble instantly blinded the collective eyes of the entire Zhan tribe. Even their leader, Zhan Mao, was merely clad in slightly thicker and more numerous animal skins, his messy long hair tied back casually with a leather thong, a string of bone chips dangling before his forehead. His weapon? A wooden spear whose handle looked polished smooth with age and use, the spearhead made of bone, split into several prongs with the longest one in the middle. Likely an ancestral heirloom, probably useless in a real fight. You stopped, 10 paces from Zhan Mao, and began to reason with him using internationally understood hand gestures. Those 3 belong to us now. What you threw away is trash. We picked it up, so it's our spoils of war. Also, this place belongs to us now. We're going to rest here. Don't bother us. Otherwise, you raised a finger, pointing to a nearby drooping tree branch laden with icicles. You'll end up like this thing. While the attention of all the Zhan tribesmen was fixed on the branch, you slowly, but actually quick as lightning, drew the Emperor's Fury longsword from your waist. With a flick of your wrist, cold light flashed. Crack. The branch snapped clean off, thudding onto the ground between the two of you, its icicles shattering. Understand? You coolly sheathed your sword, chin slightly raised. Not a peep dared escape the Zhan tribesman. Zhan Mao's brow furrowed into knots, cursing inwardly. This kid is too arrogant, too domineering, an absolute rogue. But this rogue had the power to back it up. Numbers, weapons, they couldn't compare in any way. Facing such crushing strength, there was no negotiation, only notification and being notified. Dare to disobey? Believe he wouldn't beat you senseless in minutes? You didn't even care if they understood. Having flexed your muscles, you turned and walked back, so confident you didn't even bother looking back. Seriously, with dozens of bows and crossbows aimed at their backs, who would dare make a move? They'd be turned into pincushions instantly. You swaggered back into formation. After all that commotion, dusk was approaching. The formation dispersed. Archers took up positions on the perimeter as sentries, while others efficiently cleared a campsite, gathered firewood, dug snow to melt for water, and started fires for cooking. After roughing it for 2 days, they could finally eat something hot. Everyone was full of energy, their faces beaming. Not far off, the group from the Zhan tribe was caught in limbo, like a pack of prairie dogs watching aliens. They just watched from a distance, their hearts pounding. What on earth did these murderous fiends want? Zhan Mao felt incredibly stifled, both angry and dejected. He was the great chief of a tribe of 1,000, yet he'd been slapped down face to face by some brat, and he himself had been too cowardly to even squeak. He kind of hated himself. Facing that kid just now, his legs had genuinely felt a bit weak. He sat cross-legged with the tribe's old shaman inside an animal hide tent, thick layers of dry grass and hides cushioning their behinds. Between them was an earthen fire pit where firewood burned steadily. The two stared at each other, neither speaking. But the tent was bustling, scouts coming and going like figures on a revolving lantern, reporting the enemy situation. Chief, shaman. Those people down the mountain aren't moving around randomly. They've used ropes to make a big circle around the trees, keeping everyone inside. Chief, they've started gathering wood and making fires. Looks like they're preparing to eat. Chief, they've set up several white tents. There are people with weapons standing guard inside the circle. A short while later, a returning scout brought unexpected news. Chief, those people sent someone over to talk, said, they can save the one shot in the leg. If we don't want him to die, we should carry him over quickly. Zhan and the shaman, who had been silent, exchanged glances, sparks flying. It seemed the others weren't here to wipe them out. Then, maybe there was a chance. Chief, the old shaman spoke first, his voice hoarse. Where on earth did they come from? Their weapons are so powerful. And that thing that floats on water and carries so many people. If we had something like that, maybe we could leave this godforsaken place. Even if the water floods the whole mountain, we wouldn't be afraid. Zhan's eyes lit up. That's right, that big thing floating on water. But he quickly calmed down. Steal it? Dream on. Even if they were given it, his landlubber tribe wouldn't know how to use it. However, since the other party didn't seem bent on fighting to the death, perhaps they could discuss cooperation, offer them some benefits in exchange for their help, using those big things to transport the entire tribe away from this shrinking, isolated island. But what benefits could they offer? Zhan's brain worked overtime, his CPU almost burning out. Finally, a glint appeared in his eyes and he slapped his thigh hard. The shaman is right. We can negotiate with them. Ask them to take us away from this dead mountain. I need to go meet that kid again myself. Meanwhile, on the gentle slope halfway up the mountain, several white triangular canvas tents had been erected, using locally sourced branches for frames. Inside the tents, thick antelope hides covered the ground. In the center of your tent, a long, narrow fire pit had been dug with an entrenching tool, flames leaping within. Branches were propped on either side of the pit, drying several damp animal skin garments. The girl you had picked up, along with the two terrified little kids, were currently huddled together naked, wrapped in your bearskin cloak, shivering, and staring longingly at their clothes drying over the fire. The firewood on the mountain was a bit damp and didn't burn well. Luckily, you had brought a secret weapon, tongue oil. A splash of it made the flames flare up instantly, incidentally drying the damp wood nearby. It was just that the smell of tongue oil, well, it was a bit strong. Before long, you entered the tent carrying a large bowl of steaming hot meat porridge, holding a crudely but cutely carved small wooden spoon you'd just made. You handed the bowl to the girl, pointed at the two little ones staring eagerly beside her, and gestured, "This is for the three of you." The girl hesitantly took the bowl. Following your clumsy gestures, she figured out how to use the spoon. She carefully took a sip, and her eyes instantly widened. This flavor, there was rice, dried meat, and saltiness. The taste of saltstone. This was precious stuff. These people had it too, and they actually had rice? Could it be they also farmed? 1,000 questions floated through the girl's mind. Beside her, two distinct gulp-gulp sounds were heard. It was the two children, swallowing hard from hunger. You didn't linger in the tent. Stepping outside, you looked at the few, minor clan chiefs craning their necks, peering around, and asked with a frown, "Can you still recognize the surrounding terrain? That place where the mountain collapsed last summer? Can you find it?" The Hua clan chief was the first to throw up his hands, his face crestfallen. "Chief, I can't recognize it anymore. Half the mountain is flooded. Familiar places. Completely changed, I really can't tell." The others nodded vigorously in agreement, indicating they were equally helpless. Your frown deepened, and you couldn't help but curse internally. "So I brought along a bunch of useless guides whose Navigation systems are busted. What a waste of food. Spring is almost here. If we can't deal with the barrier lake, we might as well forget about doing anything else this year and just pack up and move. Just then, from the direction where the Zhan tribe had disappeared, a large crowd of figures surged out again, though they stopped far off. Only Zhan Mao, accompanied by a few men, walked towards your position. Behind them, several strong men struggled to carry the unfortunate fellow with the arrow still stuck in his leg. "Chief, people from that tribe are coming over with the injured. Man, 6 men in total. Should we let them in?" A patrolling archer ran over to report. "Yes, bring them over." You nodded, then added, "Search them first. Keep their weapons. Return them when they leave." On second thought, if these natives lived permanently on this mountain, they might actually know the terrain. Getting their help could make things much easier. With this thought, your attitude towards the meeting became somewhat more serious. By the time Zhan Mao and his group reached you, you had dropped the arrogant, "I'm the best in the world" expression. Zhan Mao likewise had come seeking help. This time, the atmosphere between the two parties was considerably more harmonious. The man shot with the arrow was still groaning, his face pale, likely from pain or blood loss. Although your shot hadn't hit bone, a wound piercing through the thigh was no joke. If it were summer, he'd likely be dead already. He was carried before you and placed on the ground. He glared at you venomously but managed to keep quiet, apparently having been warned beforehand by Zhan Mao. You naturally couldn't be bothered to handle such a minor injury yourself. You waved over a member of the Shi clan, an old compatriot from the former Snake tribe. The Snake tribe excelled in herbalism. They were practically your resident Shenong, the mythical patron of herbal medicine, possessing an innate sensitivity to plants. You had consequently started developing them in the direction of medical representatives, tasked with gathering more medicinal herbs for the Han tribe. Fortunately, there was a Snake tribe barefoot doctor in the group you brought this time. They were quite skilled at treating this kind of external wound. Combined with the trifecta you taught them, disinfection with alcohol, using strong liquor as a substitute since you had no pure alcohol, debridement and bandaging, along with their own concocted herbal powders, it didn't take long to remove. The arrow, wash the wound with warm boiled snowmelt water, apply medicine and wrap it with clean hemp cloth. Done. As for whether it would get infected, that depended on his own constitution. However, the cold weather was relatively conducive to wound recovery. Seeing his kinsman properly treated, Zhan Mao hurriedly used gestures and expressions, bowing, and motioning repeatedly, conveying something like, sorry, we attacked first, it's not your fault. Thank you for saving my man." You inwardly scoffed, "Nonsense, of course it's not my fault. Serves you right for charging recklessly. Not shooting you dead on the spot was giving you face." The two of you sat down beside an open bonfire, engaging in an awkward chat using strenuous hand gestures. Soon, someone brought you a bowl of porridge. You casually gestured to Zhan, Mao asking, "Want some?" He wasn't shy, nodding and even pointing to the followers he had brought along. Whoa, this guy had some thick skin, freeloading food and drink and bringing his entourage. You silently looked down on him. Actually, you couldn't entirely blame Zhan Mao for being stingy. Their lives were truly harsh, food stores were dwindling, and game on the mountain was nearly gone. Otherwise, they wouldn't have resorted to the terrible idea of human sacrifice. This ritual, frankly, was just a way to have one less mouth to feed and lessen the burden on the tribe. Even if the sacrifice was ineffective, the person being gone was still beneficial to the tribe. Zhan Mao understood this perfectly well. But when Zhan Mao himself received a bowl of porridge and looked closely at its contents, he suddenly became agitated. It was rice, definitely rice. His Zhan tribe had cultivated rice for over 10 generations. How could he mistake it? However, the rice in the bowl looked slightly different from his tribe's. The Zhan tribe grew round, sticky, glutinous rice, while this bowl contained oval-shaped, slightly longer non-glutinous rice. But that wasn't important. What mattered was that the Han tribe's resources were different from theirs. Inspiration flashed in Zhan Mao's mind. He put down the bowl and carefully took out a snakeskin pouch from within his clothes, handing it to you with utmost solemnity, as if it contained the imperial seal. You took it and looked stunned as well. It was actually a bag of unhusked rice grains. It indeed looked like a different variety from the one you ate. An unexpected gain. Another crop variety. Your mood lifted considerably, and you immediately ordered someone to prepare a return gift. Soon, someone brought a small bag of snow-white salt. You handed it to Zhan Mao. For me? Zhan Mao was baffled. He had originally intended to trade seeds and farming techniques for passage on the boats, never expecting a gift in return. Who knew the Han tribe also cultivated rice? His plan was ruined. Just as he was worrying there was a gift. He opened the bag uncertainly, saw a pile of fine white powder, and became even more confused. What is this stuff? Seeing his clueless expression, you could only point at the bag, then at your own mouth, signaling, taste it. The result? Need you ask? Zhan Mao licked a tiny bit, his expression instantly shifting from confusion to shock, then to sheer ecstasy. The same reaction as every native tasting the Han tribe's refined salt for the first time. He clutched the salt pouch tightly to his chest, holding it closer than his own son. Now the previous trade conditions were off the table. Zhan Mao could only secretly pray that you were easy to talk to. Under the setting sun, Zhan Mao pointed at the neat row of wooden boats by the shore and asked haltingly, using newly learned clumsy words mixed with gestures, "That is what?" "Boat," you replied concisely. Zhan Mao repeated the new word over and over in his mouth, then pointed at the boats again, then towards himself and the direction of his distant tribe, gesturing as he asked, "Can use these boats take us to his leave?" You looked at him and thought, his tribe numbered at least 1,000. Your 20-odd boats couldn't possibly transport them all in 1 or 2 trips. Time was precious now. You had no time to act as their dedicated moving company. You shook your head and gestured. No, we have other things to do. Very important things." "Oh? What things?" Zhan Mao's curiosity was piqued. "Water is rising." You pointed at the rising water level, then gestured towards the distance. "We came to make the water fall back." This time it was Zhan Mao's turn to be astonished. So these visitors from beyond were also here because of the flood. But faced with the same problem, their solution was utterly fantastical. His tribe killed people to appease the gods. These people rolled up their sleeves intending to make the water fall back. Zhan Mao was filled with deep respect, but also a million doubts. Was this even possible? You knew he didn't believe it and couldn't be bothered to explain. You had someone fetch a bucket of water, while you drew the short knife from your belt and started digging diligently in the ground. Soon, a simple sand table emerged. It had a simulated river channel and piled up mountains. The water was brought over, and you had someone slowly pour it at the upstream end. The water flowed down the river channel normally. Then you suddenly waved your hand, increased the water flow, simulating a flash flood. When the flood waters reached the gorge between 2 mountains, you extended the hand of God and pushed over one of the mountaintops. Splash. Earth and sand tumbled down, instantly blocking the river channel. But the upstream water continued to flow, causing the water in the channel to rise higher and higher, forming a lake, a barrier lake. In the small puddle on the sand table, one earthen mound was half submerged. You pointed at that mound, then at the mountain they were currently on. Buzz. It was as if Zhan Mao's head had been struck. Enlightenment dawned instantly. He understood. Though they didn't share a language, your 3D sand table reenactment made him grasp the root cause of their current deadly predicament in an instant. Next, you picked up a leaf and pointed to the boats on the shore. Zhan Mao immediately nodded. He had gotten the rules of the sand table game. Leaf, fine, boat. Then, holding the boat, Mina leaf, you moved it downstream along the current, arriving near the submerged island. You circled it a few times, finally stopping precisely at the spot of the landslide you had created. Using your finger, you gently cleared away the earth blocking the channel there. The long-dammed lake water found an outlet and rushed downstream with a whoosh. The water level dropped rapidly, and finally the lake returned to being a river. You tossed the leaf aside, dusted off your hands, looked at the dumbfounded Zhan Mao, and said clearly word by word, accompanied by gestures, "We find that place, open that place, restore the river channel. This sand table demonstration of yours is incredibly effective. Language barrier? No problem. With this realistic reenactment, even a fool could understand, let alone seasoned veterans like the Nian tribe who have dealt with rivers for generations. Their history of growing glutinous rice goes back at least a dozen generations. The tribe, much like nomads, migrated and expanded along the river channels. They knew the inland hydrology like the back of their hand. Floods? Their ancestral records were full of them, but previously the waters always receded after causing some trouble. Only this time the water seemed supercharged, rising higher and higher. Of course, they didn't understand why. As soon as the flood came, they all fled up the mountains. Later, when they wanted to go down and see, the water had submerged the paths, trapping them on the mountaintop, helpless. But the moment you set up this sand table, Zhan Mao's mind, already familiar with water, suddenly buzzed. It clicked instantly. If it was truly as you said, that a mountain collapse had blocked the river channel, then this was something the Nian tribe couldn't handle. But what about your Han tribe? So many boats, so many people. And you even brought over 400 strong laborers from so far away. Besides, your weapons are so sophisticated, surely your tools are decent too. Otherwise, did those big things, boats, that run on water just fall from the sky? At this thought, Zhan Mao's heart trembled with excitement. Perhaps this matter they couldn't solve by praying to gods and Buddhas, you could actually fix with your own hands. Taking a huge step back, even if you couldn't fix it either. Just establishing a connection with you might allow them to hitch a ride on your boats to escape in the end, control the flood, or escape. Two paths to survival, and both now depended entirely on your Han tribe. Sacrifices? Forget it. Facts proved the gods were busy and had no time for them. Better to rely on these tangible, powerful allies right before their eyes. Your method is good. Zhan Mao suppressed his excitement and gestured, asking the most critical question. But if the mountain really collapsed such a huge pile of rocks, can you move it? Although the prospect you've laid out is tempting, whether they could actually benefit remained uncertain. Compared to the risky venture of controlling the flood, Zhan Mao secretly preferred to just flee. Zhan Mao's inner thoughts. What do I care if it floods or not? If I had boats, I'd have left long ago. Wouldn't finding a new home be better? Why go through all this trouble? See, this is the difference between tribes practicing shifting cultivation and settled tribes like yours, stubbornly committed to one piece of land. Different values lead to different developmental ceilings. As long as they don't learn intensive farming and how to settle down, they can only skim the surface of resources, unable to develop them deeply. Take metal smelting, for example. Maybe their ancestors did discover ore veins, but before they could figure it out, the tribe moved again. When would they ever unlock such technology? But your Han tribe is different. All your assets are tied to the land. A home for thousands built with 3 years of painstaking effort. Just abandon it? You must be joking. Therefore, to live peacefully, this flood disaster must be resolved. Zhan Mao wanted to run while you were mostly resigned. You didn't want to deal with this mess either, but you had no choice. Nothing is impossible for a willing heart, you declared with a serious expression, your tone firm and decisive. As long as we put our minds to it, there's always a way. Although Zhan Mao didn't understand a single word, he understood the unwavering determination on your face, the won't rest until it's done attitude. All right, looks like fleeing directly was off the table. Might as well help control the flood. It wasn't that he was particularly enthusiastic, but mainly to keep an option open. If the flood control failed, when you guys decided to leave, It would be easier for them to ask for a ride. Consider it a show of commitment. Well, is there anything we can help with? Zhan gestured again, his attitude now very proactive. This was exactly what you were waiting for. You pointed to the gap you had made on the sand table and gestured. We don't know the area. We can't find this place. You live here permanently. Are you familiar with the downstream river channel? A barrier lake means something downstream is blocked. Follow the old riverbed downstream, and we'll definitely find the landslide point. You explained animatedly, combining words and gestures, and Zhan finally understood, patting his chest in assurance. Leave this to him. His tribe migrated all the way from downstream. How could they not know the downstream routes? Although, much of it was flooded now. As long as those mountains were still there, he could point out the general location. He then asked how many people you needed as guides. You thought for a moment. These people can't row boats, can't use your tools, and communication is difficult. Relying on them for labor was unrealistic. Just acting as guides would suffice. 1 or 2 would be enough. Seeing you hold up 2 fingers, Zhan nodded immediately. Perfect. 2 people. Even if there was danger, the loss wouldn't be significant. Participation is key, as long as they could hitch a ride in the end, with throw. The cooperation settled. Zhan didn't stay long. He had to hurry back to report to the shaman and pick 2 sharp individuals to serve as guides. After bidding you farewell, he led the remaining tribesmen, carrying the injured, and quickly returned to the mountaintop. Dusk fell. The tribespeople, having eaten and drunk their fill, had already started crawling into the earth coffins to sleep soundly. They needed to catch a few hours of sleep before relieving the sentries. The so-called earth coffin was a clever fieldcraft trick you taught everyone, learned from your past life in the military. When there were no tents and no time to build shelters, you simply dug a pit in the ground just large enough for a person to lie in, build fires in the pit and on both sides to heat the ground. Once the fire died down, cover the bottom with a thin layer of soil, dry grass, and animal skins. Then lie down inside. Job done. This method served 3 purposes. Insect repellent, warmth, and the nearby fire kept wild animals away. As long as one had digging tools, like the entrenching tools you brought, making an earth coffin was very convenient. Of course, as the leader, you had a tent and didn't need to enjoy this premium accommodation. You entered your tent. The clothes by the fire pit were gone, worn again by the girl. The 2 little kids were also dressed, the 3 of them huddled, together, covered by your bearskin cloak. The 2 little ones were already whimpering softly in their sleep, and the girl holding them also had her eyes closed. But in the firelight, her slightly trembling long eyelashes mercilessly betrayed her. She was pretending to be asleep. Your inner monologue, all bundled up like that and still pretending to sleep, afraid I'll eat you or something? You chuckled softly, not exposing her. You noticed the empty bowl placed by the fire pit, so clean it reflected light, with no water to wash bowls in this wilderness. It could only have been licked clean. Licked way too clean. You shook your head with feeling, lay down on the other side of the fire pit, covered yourself with an antelope skin, hugged your long sword and short knife, and closed your eyes to sleep as well. Perhaps hearing no movement. The girl who had been feigning sleep quietly opened her eyes. Her gaze was complex, mixed with curiosity and fear, as she secretly sized you up. Who knows if she was cursing you as a beast in her heart, or perhaps worse than a beast. On the mountaintop, inside Zhan tent, the shaman sat upright, listening intently to Zhan report. Zhan recounted everything. Your flood, control plan, the sand table demonstration, and the cooperation agreement they had reached, the Nian tribe providing 2 guides. Communication between them was smooth. Even without the sand table, the shaman understood. Whether your method would work, his old bones couldn't judge. But the tribe was only contributing 2 people, a negligible loss, and they might even get to hitch a ride on the boats later. Why not? The Nian shaman immediately expressed his approval. With the 2 top leaders of the Nian tribe in agreement, the matter was settled. The night passed without incident. Early the next morning, you were woken up by the two little kids. The boy, less than 2 years old, well-rested, had long forgotten the terror of being sacrificed. He woke up just as dawn broke, toddled over to the fire pit in the center of the tent, and aimed at last night's embers. Pssh, unleashing a stream of boy's urine. Sizzle. White smoke accompanied by a strong smell of ammonia instantly filled the tent. The little rascal just stood there, bare-bottomed, giggling foolishly while wriggling his little waist to shake dry. This biochemical weapon drove you straight out of the tent. The sky was already light. Some tribespeople were still lazing in their earth coffins, while the early risers had already changed shifts, gathering firewood or melting snow for cooking. You scooped up a handful of snow to wash your face, clearing your head, then patrolled the camp, confirming the night had passed peacefully before eagerly waiting for breakfast. Only when the sun was fully up and the porridge was cooked were the late sleepers gradually woken. You also returned to the tent to wake up the girl and the two little ones, your 3 dependents, for the meal. Children love to sleep, but at the mention of food they groggily climbed up. This time, everyone ate together outside around the bonfire, each with a bowl of hot porridge. While slurping your porridge, you assigned today's tasks. The main force would stay put, using this place as a temporary base. Today, 2 local guides would lead the way, and an elite team would set out for reconnaissance. If the plan succeeded, everyone participating in the operation would be rewarded upon return. Finally, you looked at the girl sitting beside you. She was awkwardly holding a large bowl, feeding the 2 little ones porridge, occasionally stealing glances at your group of otherworldly visitors, listening to your incomprehensible words. With a look of bewildered helplessness, you broke off half of your own heated flatbread and handed it to her. The girl quickly took it and took a careful bite. The 2 little ones beside her immediately protested, whining and demanding some too, suddenly finding the porridge unappetizing. The surrounding tribespeople chuckled, especially those from Hanyang City, who had children of similar ages back home. Seeing this scene made them feel a little homesick. You pointed towards the distant Nian tribe's mountain peak, then pointed to your people and boats here, gesturing to ask the girl, "Are you going back to your tribe or coming with us?" Although the girl couldn't speak your language, her actions spoke volumes. She put down the bowl, wrapped her small arms tightly around one of yours, and even tugged forcefully at the bearskin cloak she was wearing. The meaning was clear. "You gave this to me, I'm not giving it back, and I'm going with you." You looked up at the distant mountaintop thinking, snatching one person isn't impressive. What I want is your entire tribe. But you said nothing, quickly finished your breakfast and told everyone to start packing. The entire force wasn't needed today. 10 boats would be enough. The rest would remain at the camp. You sent someone to inform Zhan Mao to bring the guides over. But shortly after, Zhan Mao himself arrived, bringing only one other person. "You are coming with us personally." You were a bit surprised. This guy had guts. Zhan Mao nodded, replying with broken vocabulary and gestures. "You can go." "I can go." You smiled, didn't ask further, and waved for everyone to board the boats. Unexpectedly, the girl also scurried over, followed closely by her 2 little shadows, insisting on going with you, terrified you'd sail off and abandon them. Taking them along was definitely a burden, but you glanced at the people staying behind, on the shore, then at the Nian tribespeople faintly visible on the distant mountaintop, and with a wave of your hand, "Bring them." This was just reconnaissance anyway. It wouldn't make much difference. Thus, the vanguard detachment of 10 boats, guided by Zhan Mao, set off majestically towards the southeast. Seeing the direction he pointed, you nodded inwardly. Southeast. That was the direction of the Liuyang River's lower reaches. It seemed these 2 rivers were indeed connected, likely merging into an even larger river eventually. The terrain in this area featured continuous mountain ranges to the south, like a high wall holding back the water to the north. This explained why the newcomers who arrived in late autumn had all detoured from the south to reach Liuyang County. To the northwest of the open water lay vast mountain forests, with many towering trees half submerged, resembling a flooded forest or swamp from afar. As the fleet proceeded, you summoned the commander from another boat, a youth from the Eagle clan, specifically responsible for liaising with the air units. Hearing the summons, the youth raised the bone whistle hanging around his neck and blew a series of sharp, intermittent rhythmic notes. Before long, the cry of an eagle echoed from the sky, and a massive dark shadow appeared, circling above everyone's heads. You hadn't been idle during this time either. Pulling out the small notebook you carried and a portable brush pen made from bamboo tubes, you dipped it in the murky river water and dashed off a coded message to Ying Rui, who remained in Hanyang City. Plan proceeding smoothly. Acquired. 1,000-person tribe, potential recruits. Tell him to prepare for reception. After writing, you rolled up the paper, stuffed it into a bamboo tube as thick as an arm, sealed the opening with animal hide and string, then stood at the boat's crew, holding the tube high. The giant eagle in the sky understood instantly. With a magnificent dive, its beating wings stirred up a gale. It hovered steadily overhead, precisely snatched the bamboo tube with its talons, then soared back into the sky, becoming a black dot speeding towards the Han tribe's territory. Those on the boats only felt the sky darken above them for a moment, as if storm clouds were pressing down. The bird was simply enormous, though not as large as those monstrous terror birds. Its wingspan was easily 8 or 9 meters, nearly covering the entire boat as it passed. It thoroughly frightened the girl and Zhan Mao on board. However, when they realized this magnificent giant eagle was a pet summoned by you, their awe and reverence for you reached a new level. This tribe could actually tame such formidable beasts. But Zhan Mao's interest wasn't limited to just that. He was more curious about the paper and pen you had just used, and those strange symbols, characters, you had drawn on it. As a tribal leader who had already unlocked the cultivation technology, Zhan Mao's knowledge and thinking were relatively advanced. He could grasp the significance of many things that others couldn't understand. Just now, what was that? Unable to contain his curiosity, Zhan Mao pointed at the writing. Materials you had used and gestured his question. Paper, pen, Han characters, letter. You answered concisely. This alone demonstrated the Han tribe's sophistication. Through this simple exchange and his own deductions, Zhan Mao already realized the Han tribe's language system was incredibly developed. They had distinct names for everything and could even record them using corresponding symbols, Han characters. This was undoubtedly the level of a top-tier civilization, countless times stronger than their Nian tribe. Back home, they still referred to everything as this one or that one. Typical Nian tribe conversation. Hey you, go tell that guy to do that thing to that stuff? Unless you were around those people constantly, who the hell could understand that kind of communication? That was the pain of an underdeveloped language. But the Han tribe was impressive because their language could clearly name anything. No more, this one, that one. Moreover, they had invented a writing system to match their language and could even use it to send messages across distances. That was even more remarkable. In Zhan Mao's heart, his admiration and apprehension towards you deepened further. Zhan Mao's inner thoughts again. This tribe is too strong. Right, they can also produce white salt themselves. And the clothes they wear, so smooth, like they're woven from countless fine threads. Amazing. The fleet of 10 boats continued southeast. For half the morning, under Zhan Mao's constant guidance, the boats rounded a huge mountain spur and finally entered a main river channel flanked by steep cliffs, the water unfathomably deep. Here, it was less like a large river and more like a major waterway, a true. During Z, the fleet proceeded until around 3 in the afternoon. Amidst the continuous cliffs on both banks, you finally saw the target, the site of the massive landslide. The river channel here was indeed completely blocked. You directed the boats closer. then carefully climbed onto a huge boulder that had tumbled from the cliff face looking downstream. You saw that where the river valley should have been, the entire riverbed was now exposed, the dry earth covered in a dense, spiderweb-like pattern of cracks. Flooding upstream, yet the water source is cut off downstream. The drought, downstream, must be severe. You stood on the giant rock, gazing at the cracked earth, and couldn't help but sigh. Who knew how many living creatures had died of thirst downstream? However, upon that cracked riverbed, there seemed to be something shiny, reflecting the afternoon sun, catching your eye. At the other end of the valley where loose stones tumbled down, the cracked riverbed glittered harshly under the afternoon sun. The dried-up channel resembled a sandy beach covered in golden spiderwebs. "Yuye Dali." Standing on a boulder the size of a house, you yelled downstream towards the boats. "Each of you take 20 men, and hurry over that ridge to check it out. I think there's something good under that riverbed." "Yes, sir," the 2 men answered crisply, their voices resonant. No sooner were the words spoken than Yuye and Dali, grabbing their tools, led their respective men, and began scaling the great wall of earth and rock that bisected the river. Beneath your feet was the breach point of the barrier lake, though in reality, it hadn't breached at all. Giant rocks fallen from the cliffs. On both sides formed the skeleton, while driftwood and silt brought by the floodwaters acted as filler. Heaven's own miraculous engineering had inadvertently created a natural dam, completely blocking the eastward flow of the river. This dam was quite high. Inside the barrier, the water level was less than 2 meters from the top, but outside, the drop from the dam's crest to the cracked riverbed was easily over 10 meters, practically a small cliff. Getting down, however, wasn't difficult. No ropes were needed. Silt washed out during the collapse had formed a natural gentle slope on the dam's outer side, conveniently providing a path down, while also sealing the water flow even tighter. Dali and Yu Yi led their men scrambling up to the dam's crest, then slid down the muddy slope onto the riverbed. The riverbed looked cracked and dry, but underneath it was moist and very soft. One step sank half a foot into the mud. When they clearly saw the glittering substance on the riverbed, their hearts skipped a beat. Good heavens! This waterless riverbed was carpeted everywhere with metallic particles. Golden yellow, they glittered, dazzlingly under the sun. This stuff was familiar to Dali and Yu Yi. The tribe had smelted plenty of brass in the early years, and these particles, their color, their weight, were identical to brass. No mistake. Copper. This was treasure. Back then, how much effort did it take to smelt a bit of copper? Cutting wood, hauling wood, making charcoal, crushing ore, grinding powder. After all that toil, exhausted like dogs, they could only produce a small furnace load. But now, under their feet, it was everywhere. The large ones were like corn kernels, the small ones like sand, glistening gold, heavy in the hand. It had to be copper. With a collective whoop, the 40-odd men scattered, bending over like farmers planting rice seedlings in spring. Digging at the ground, they scraped the surface, picked particles from the cracks, and even dug directly into the soft mud with their hands, rubbing it between their palms to reveal hard granules within. My goodness, if we dug up all this mud and washed it, how much copper would we get? This mouth-watering thought popped into everyone's mind. While the men below were busy as bees, you had no time to waste here. Seeing the sun was about to set, knowing it had taken most of the day to row here, you needed to quickly decide whether to head back or camp on the spot. How could you let them pan for gold here? Cupping your hands around your mouth like a megaphone, you yelled down at them. All right. Stop picking. Come back first. We found the place. It won't run away. What are you dawdling for?" Hearing your call, the men below were still reluctant. Before leaving, they grabbed another handful from the ground, many stuffing mud and all, into their pouches. Panting as they climbed back up the slope, they immediately started clamoring. "Chief, it's all copper down there. Lots and lots of copper." One by one, as if presenting treasure, they held out their dirty hands, freshly pulled from the mud, palms filled with piles of glittering golden particles, waving them in front of you. If this, had happened before your transmigration, seeing this sight would probably have made you faint from excitement. But now, you were excited inwardly, yet your face remained impassive. In fact, the moment you saw that glittering riverbed, you guessed. It was likely gold sand. Why? Obviously, only gold has such stable chemical properties to remain brilliantly metallic after soaking in water for so long. If it were brass particles, they would have long rusted into green clumps. Gold shines everywhere, brass buried in. The earth just waits to turn green. Nevertheless, watching the men eagerly presenting gold to you, your heart still gave an undignified flutter. But you quickly regained your composure. It's just gold, who cares? In this world where you call the shots if you don't recognize gold as currency, then this field of gold is no different from roadside stones. All right, find a bag and put it away for now. We'll deal with it back there. You waved your hand, signaling everyone to calm down. Let's leave this place first. This isn't the spot to talk. You looked up at the narrow strip of sky visible between the towering cliffs. The rocks underfoot had all fallen from up there. If your luck was bad and another one fell, landing right on your head, that would be far too stimulating. Hearing you say this, the men who had been ecstatic just moments before as if they'd struck treasure were now filled with profound admiration for you. Just look at our chief. We find some brass and lose our heads with joy, but look at the chief, steady as a rock, as if everything is under control, or perhaps he simply doesn't care about this bit of brass at all. The difference. This is the presence of a true leader. Everyone reboarded the boats. Zhan Mao, sharing the boat with you, eyed the natural dam before him, his mind working furiously. Yesterday, on the sand table, you had casually swept the obstacle away with one hand. But seeing the real thing today, Zhan Mao just shook his head. This dam was nearly 80 meters long, over 2 meters high, and who knew how deep it extended beneath the water? The fallen rocks, the small ones like millstones, the medium ones like elephants, the largest like houses, choked the entire river channel. With just the 400 men you brought, hoping to clear this thing? Dream on. Even if he threw in his entire Nian tribe, it would probably be a struggle. Since it couldn't be fixed, it was best to figure out how to escape quickly. Thinking this, Zhan Mao immediately squeezed out a fawning, chrysanthemum-like smile and looked towards you. The only one who could make the final decision. Chief of the Han tribe, he said sincerely. The rocks here are truly enormous, too big to move even with more people. What do you plan to do next? His question was cunning. Ostensibly asking about your plan, it was secretly setting a trap. As soon as you admitted you had no solution and were preparing to return, he could smoothly propose something like, could you do us a favor, send us away, we'll give you something for your trouble. Too bad for him. Who were you? Of course you had a way. Even if you couldn't level the entire dam, blasting an opening to release the floodwater was a piece of cake. But could you say that? No. After dealing with this old fox Zhan Mao a few times, how could you not see through his little scheme? Wasn't he just trying to borrow your boats to escape? Coincidentally, you were also pondering how to package up his 1,000+ people and take them with you. Free population. Meat delivered right to your mouth. How could you refuse? Therefore, even though you had a way to solve the flood problem, you had to pretend you were stumped right now. If you cleared the river channel easily, lowering the water level, it would be uncertain whether the Nian tribe would still be willing to relocate. Now that he had walked right into it, you could easily seize the opportunity. Why wouldn't you? No, there must be a way. You put on an agitated expression, looking like, I refuse to believe I can't handle this, speaking and gesturing emphatically. There has to be a way. We can definitely clear this place. Zhan Mao chuckled inwardly. If you're so capable, then go ahead and do it. Pretend. Keep pretending. He mentally categorized you. Looked impressive, had many subordinates, but faced with a real challenge. Like this, wasn't he just clueless? Young, so concerned with face, unwilling to admit inadequacy in front of outsiders. Understandable. This was precisely your plan. First, you confidently declared you would handle it. Now at the scene, if you immediately backed down, it would look too fake. You had to act. Perform a role consistent with your persona as a young and impetuous leader to deceive this old fox Zhan Mao and make him fall obediently into your trap. Sure enough, Zhan Mao saw through your unwillingness combined with your expression of being exasperated yet helpless. Wasn't this the standard template for youthful stubbornness? Zhan Mao smugly scripted your actions in his mind, completely unaware that he was the prey about to be packaged and carried away. However, while you threw your little tantrum, Zhan Mao still had to say what needed to be said. He had no intention of waiting here with you to die. Well, Han Chief, Zhan Mao began cautiously, figuring out a way here will surely take quite some time, right? How about this? While you're thinking, over the next few days, you first send some boats to take my tribe's people upstream, so we can find a new place to settle. Your tribe is so powerful, surely you wouldn't refuse such a small matter. He flattered you, then changed tack. Of course, if the Han Chief wants us to trade something for it, that's no problem either. As long as it's something our Nean tribe has, we will definitely not hold back. Zhan Mao delivered this speech with such sincerity, praising you while setting his own conditions. In his view, young, powerful leaders like you were most susceptible to this kind of approach. You indeed did not disappoint Zhan Mao, immediately striking a pose of, I am exactly as awesome as you say. You're right. You lifted your chin slightly, looking down your nose at him. Isn't it just moving your tribe upstream a trivial matter? As for payment, Tisk, what good things could you possibly have? What we have, you don't. What you have, we look down on. You immediately took the bait and ran with it, following the script perfectly. You could even guess what Zhan Mao would say next. Surely another round of over-the-top flattery. As expected, Zhan Mao, the old fox, ultimately couldn't escape the pit you had dug. Ha 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 ha. Zhan Mao clapped his hands and laughed heartily. Han Chief is truly magnanimous. So young yet commanding such a powerful tribe. Our Nean tribe truly cannot compare. Thank you so much for sending us upstream this time. However, regarding the payment, please, Han Chief, you must accept it. Although our Nean tribe is poor, as long as it's something we have, just say the word, Han Chief, and I, Zhan Mao, will keep my promise. He adopted a righteous stance of, I will absolutely not take advantage of you. You cooperated by snorting through your nose, wearing the expression of a local tycoon looking down on a country bumpkin. Your subtext clear. Your tribe is dirt poor. Barely able to feed yourselves. What could you possibly have that I'd want? However, this time you didn't directly refuse. Sigh, you feigned magnanimity and waved your hand. Your tribe's things. There's really nothing I fancy. But since you insist on giving something, well, let me think about it first. Anyway, sending all of you won't happen in a day or two. I'll tell you when I think of something. Acting superior felt great. Hearing you relent and agree, Zhan Mao's heart bloomed with joy. He immediately launched into another round of flowery compliments, praising this young chief, more than a decade his junior, to the heavens. He thought to himself, just treat it as humoring a child. Little kids, don't they just love showing off and bragging? Normal, ha 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 ha. The two continued their friendly exchange, one laying the praise on thick, the other playing dumb while understanding everything, communicating, through a mix of garbled speech and gestures. Unbeknownst to them, the fleet had already been sailing back for several hours. Fortunately, the days were getting longer, and having scouted the route during the day, the return journey was much faster. By the time the setting sun had completely sunk below the lake's surface and 2 crescent moons hung in the sky, your reconnaissance team finally returned to the camp on the small island. Jamao scrounged dinner at your camp again, his main purpose being to quickly finalize the major task of relocating his tribe. He knew nothing about boat transport and was completely ignorant about the upstream conditions, so naturally he could only follow your arrangements. The plan you proposed was Transport 300 people per trip. Your fleet could carry 400, but the Nian tribespeople couldn't row, so 100 of your men would be needed to handle the boats and navigation. With over 1,000 people in the Nian tribe, it would take 4 to 5 trips to move everyone. Figuring 4 days for a round trip, the goal was to have everyone moved by the beginning of next month. As for the destination, you generously offered to temporarily settle them at your main base, the Han tribe settlement. You boasted that it was incredibly safe, with no rivals anywhere nearby, and the place was large enough for them to stay temporarily. Once everyone arrived, you could all look for a good place to rebuild their homes together. Your plan sounded reasonable. Zhan Mao believed that the Han tribe settlement was safe from external enemies. After all, with your large numbers, strange weapons, and tactical formations, what foolish enemy would dare challenge such a formidable tribe? But precisely because you were so formidable, Zhan Mao felt even more uneasy. The Han tribe might have no enemies, but wasn't the Han tribe itself their biggest potential threat, sending hundreds of his people, batch by batch, into your stronghold? Hey, who knew if they wouldn't just be detained the moment they disembarked? Then they would truly have arrived at your tribe, the kind of arrival from which there was no departure. Zhan Mao's heart was pounding with uncertainty, so he expressed his concerns very diplomatically. Han Chief, our people, arriving. At your tribe's place, won't they cause you trouble? Can you truly guarantee their safety? Hey, what kind of talk is that? You feigned great anger, slapping your thigh hard, acting, of course. You don't trust the strength and reputation of our Han tribe? Fine, since you're worried, how about this? You proposed, seemingly bristling with indignation. We'll send the first group over. When they arrive, you designate someone you trust from that group. Let him return with the empty boats and report back to you personally about the situation. There, that should satisfy you, right? This impulsive suggestion, born of feeling insulted, sounded like heavenly music to Zhan Mao's ears. His eyes lit up. That's a great idea. Sending someone back to report each time would allow him to stay informed and prevent the Han tribe from just swallowing his people. Just as Zhan Mao was inwardly congratulating himself on his successful negotiation, you, the nouveau riche chief, slowly added another condition, one that made he seem incredibly stingy, yet he couldn't possibly refute it, helping transport your people is no problem. You picked at your fingernails, your tone suggesting it was perfectly natural. But let's get the unpleasantries out of the way first. Your food and clothing during the journey, and while you're temporarily staying at our place, you'll have to sort that out yourselves. I'm only responsible for the transport. I provide the ride, not the meals. Don't blame me if people starve or freeze to death later.